Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about managers and remote work. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, Frederick, why is it that some executives and managers discourage working from home for software engineers? Well, because one part is it's hard to say for specific people, but the general idea is either that you're not going to work as hard if you work from home, you're not going to communicate as effectively if you're working remotely, and then the unspoken one is that if everybody's working from home, what purpose does all the HR people and like the office environment and like the company as a whole and so forth? It's a what happens to the personal gut feeling of the people who are very attached to the social element. Let me explain that a little bit. So guys, in case you haven't noticed that, some people want to read a book and some people go out partying to relax. And in a company where the people who are prefer to read a book can all work from home, there's not going to be a whole lot of people left. Because even the people who like going out and partying and so forth will do the thing that humans do whenever they're given the option, and that is to be lazy. And it's usually very convenient for the average person to work from home rather than going into the office. And when they get used to that, they sort of realize, as I was saying, like there are all these other factors that can affect their overall performance. Like that's the idea at the very least, right? Now, from a management perspective, as I was saying, that is not a great thing because the work environment and like the spirit of the company, like all of these, team spirit and indoctrination into a company culture and so forth, they become so much more difficult to control and manage when you don't have people in the office space. And then of course that brings the question, why do you have an office? So, and then there are subtle things like, if the salespeople bring over people, there's nobody there anymore? Like it gives the wrong impression. It's that untangible feeling some people attach themselves to. That's why you have these weird things where people have an impression of going into one place over going into another place, and then they start filling in they're starting to inject their own emotions into the situation, and that colors their impression of the overall environment. And that is something that managers are very, very aware of. Now, the reality is that similar to how the open office space was created, there is actually no definitive proof that there is any downside to the remote working environment. It's, as I said, it's a very any sane person will know that this is an individual thing. There's nothing that can definitively state to you that there is a better way of doing it, like that being in an office versus remote, etc., because it's literally the same thing as saying that there is an optimal way for you to design a workout routine or design a meal plan or a preference in music or whatever. It very much depends on each person. And the thing that people don't want to admit is that the position that you take is usually just a reflection of your own value system, such as with the open office space. It has been definitively proven, according to studies, that the concentration time of people who work in cubicles is higher. Like their overall productivity is acclaimed to be higher than the open office thing. But the open office is still very popular because of the sensation of community, which incidentally, guys, comes back to the same goddamn thing I was saying, that the manager has a gut feeling that this is something that they want and they like the idea and therefore you do it. Sort of like how a dictator or some, like whoever is in power just goes, you know what, I don't smoke, therefore none of you should smoke. There is nothing more complicated to it than that, I promise you. And anybody who claims that it is more complicated than that is lying out of their fucking ass. Because that is as far as you can push the argument that people are encouraging, discouraging, etc., etc. It really comes down to what type of work environment do you want to provide to your workers. Now, the productivity aspect and so forth, as I've said before, this is true. It is true that some people cannot handle the freedom, quote unquote, of the unsupervised, but at the same time there are people who can. That's why we don't have a ban on alcohol or cigarettes or things like that, because some people can deal with the responsibility and some cannot. Now, for the individual manager and dealing with this sort of situation, it's really as simple as it's a balancing act between what can you, because it's actually kind of funny, because if you take the stance of saying that everybody's going to work from the office, there is a cost to that. That's a risk, because if, especially in software developers, if the software developers don't want to work as part of in the office, and if you consider the software developer's job, there is no reason for them to be there whatsoever, assuming now that it's like they can do like remote calls and so forth, because there's no physical reason for them to, like, no physical benefit for them to be in the same office. Then why would you force them to go there? Well, you're going to force them to go there because, as I said, because you're injecting your own ideas and agenda into the mix, and you can absolutely do that. But if the software developers don't want to play that game, they can actually quit, and then you lose people instead. So that's the balancing act for the manager. Are you going to force your people to be like? Can you do that and still have them like sort of stay, or don't you care? Because usually it's actually it's very much depends on what are you going to bet on, how much how valuable are these people, and how important is it for them to be remote workers. And so what I usually encourage people to do is the thing that you should always do. Instead of following an ideology or some stupid like sweeping generalization rule, when you don't deal with millions and millions of people, go and talk to your people. It's that simple. You go and talk to them and say, hey, do you want to try this thing out? Because guys, there are many companies who do only remote work. There are companies who make it work. I've worked in many teams where the productivity is, I mean, we're still producing very well, except like there's no benefit from us being in the same, apart, as I said, from that mental satisfaction some people get from it. But then the question is, who are you optimizing for? With the open office thing, you're actually saying that you are favoring one thing, but you're compromising with another. There's always pros and cons, right? But if you go and talk to your people, you're going to be able to figure out very quickly where they stand on this issue. And I suggest that you do that as opposed to following some general like idea of what's going to be a good solution and what's not going to be a good solution. Because remote work is actually a benefit to some people. You might actually get some people interested in working with you or working for your company if you provide the remote option. It's the same thing. Why did we offer flex time to software developers? Why not just say everybody's there at 8 o'clock? Well, because that's a perk of working in the environment. So is remote working. The thing that is really important for you to figure out is, can the people handle that responsibility? And if you do have good people, they can. Because, as I like to say, you don't need rules for the well-intended, smart, productive people that you work with, and those should be the bulk. The rules are there to get the people who are too lazy or doesn't give a shit to go in the same direction as everybody else. So, what I want you to take away from this is that usually the executives and the managers discourage working from home for software engineers for the same damn reason they do it for everybody else. It is more has more to do with this idea that if you don't supervise people, they're gonna do selfish things. And in some societies, absolutely. But that is what you breed into people when you have when you create a population of people who are very cutthroat, hierarchic, and it's basically okay with corruption and things like that. This is the sort of mindset that you breed into people. On the other hand, if you have a trust-based system and you actually go out of your way to give people the benefit of doubt, it might work in a different way. It might work differently for you. But usually the productivity thing is something that is a concern. The other parts are, as you know, you cannot possibly be as productive by working from home and not being in the same room as your teammates. Bullshit. Absolute bullshit. Once again, it's a completely generalized idea that is based on the real reason, which is always the real reason in these sorts of situations. What is the gut feeling and personal value system of whoever has the most amount of money and power in the company? The hippo. Highest paid person opinion is the thing that rules the reason why your managers are saying what they're saying. And it's always a way off. Is the hippo's opinion better or more important? I promise you, they will find numbers to prove whatever they are saying. It's, as I said, it's the same thing as with the open office space, because it's a value system based on something that is not usually the thing that they're telling you that it's about. It's about something different. And my personal suggestion is, managers, go and talk to your software team. And if you already are concerned that they're not going to do a good job unless you force them to be in the office, why did you hire these people? Are you saying that, like, because my real question is then, what guarantees do you have that they write good code? Because you don't know what they're coding. But somehow you are sure that it's going to be better if they're in the same room where you're sitting as opposed to them writing it somewhere else. Have a great day.